1921 at Horace Mann, and my daughter was in the class of 2000, and I was in between.
You know where it is? Okay.
That was really cool. Wow.
Yeah. Nowadays, I don't know if I qualify.
My first date was a boy from Horace Mann.
Really?
Remember that?
How old were you on your first date?
13.
Hey, hey, Ben.
Hello, hello.
Hi, Ben.
Hello.
Back then we started earlier.
Yeah.
It's true.
Sure,
Kids nowadays don't seem to date at all.
Yeah, I don't mind starting much earlier, but you know, we got to make it work for everyone's schedules.
Now, Jim was talking about dating.
Well, yeah.
Not
Okay.
meeting.
I
Oh,
said
I see.
I volunteered that I'd gone to Horace Mann. Louisa said her first date was a boy from Horace Mann. And she's about to tell me it was me.
That'd be very funny.
Yeah, it would. But
Richard has a panoply of fancy schools on his resume.
Right. Shelley and I found out that we graduated from the same public high school, but he was 4 or 5 years before me.
I wish I could send my kids to Horace Mann. I got to work harder. Pay for that tuition.
Yeah, I mean, in those days it was affordable.
My son.
I think when I went to Horace Mann, it was like $3,000 a year or less.
But what was that in 2022 dollars?
It was still a lot less than it is now. And when my daughter went there in 2000, it was about 15,000.
It's definitely like I feel like private school tuition is definitely inflation plus maybe a couple pluses.
It's funny that the most businesses compete with each other by keeping prices down. The private schools compete with each other by keeping prices up and putting in one amenity after another that really are tangential to education.
The parents have, New York parents have all this FOMO. And so the more amenities, the more tuition is, people feel like they need to pay it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the one advantage obviously is that you have a better chance of going to a better college. But
yeah.
Smaller classes. That is important.
yeah. Let's give it, you want to give it a couple more minutes, see who shows up?
Sounds
Richard,
good. Let's do it.
maybe start at least introducing Benjamin. I'll tell you right now, I have to leave around 7, so I will.
I think we may be finished by 7.
Okay.
It's a very light.
I want to do a quick thing on the DNS.
Oh, yeah. You know what? Why don't you do that now?
Okay, perfect. So Benjamin actually has been on the strategy committee. I don't know if you're going to stay or not because you only have to one committee.
I need to make sure I do enough that or don't overcommit so that I don't get in trouble at home. But other than that, sure.
So we usually don't have any budget requests from land use. We could, but we haven't over the years. But there is one section in the DNS on land use. And in it, we talk mostly about ULURP and zoning. So if everyone could take a quick look at it, it's one paragraph, and send any comments to Richard and me and Ben if you have, you want to make any changes. It's basically been the same for the last couple of years.
Where do we find it, Roberta?
It's on our website. It's under district need
Okay.
statement. And you just scroll through it. It'd be interesting to see some of the other stuff as well.
Okay,
The demographics are at the beginning, and I was having trouble scanning it, and city planning next year will probably be able to give it to us in a format that we're able to easily pick out each section and send it to you, but this year it wasn't able to do that.
how would you feel about a budget request for an intern for land use?
Well, that would not come through that. There are urban fellows that we can apply
Right.
for.
Right.
I can jump on this. Actually, Beverly and I were speaking about this earlier today.
Okay.
And it's something that we were literally looking at this afternoon in the office.
Oh, good. All right.
If I could follow up on that, I think one thing that could be really great. Sorry. Hi, everyone. My name is Miranda. I'm sort of new to the committee, but I think there have been meetings canceled since I've joined, so it's nice to see everyone officially. I know that on different community boards, different boroughs throughout the city at different points in history, there have been sort of land use education boot camps for community board members. And I know that's something that I would be super interested in because land use is this very wonky policy thing. And, you know, I am so honored to have a spot on the community board, but I sometimes feel like I don't have all the tools necessary or know all the tools that are at our disposal. So I don't know if that's necessarily a budget request. I don't know.
No. So to answer that, the borough president usually does a land use 101 and land use 102 session. The other piece of it, there is some information in the members handbook that I think we emailed to you a while ago. I can email it again. And Louisa wrote the city planning handbook on land use, and I think that's online. Louise, is that online?
I think it is now, and it really is full of a lot of very detailed information.
Max, you think it would be possible to get a hold of either the borough president or land use, city planning, and see if they can get us hard copies of the handbook?
Sure. I thought that we'd only had very outdated copies, was what Jesse told me earlier today.
We have, the one I have is about 5 years old.
That's probably what she meant. So
It really actually is still a good tool for learning what zoning is all about.
Right. The thing is,
and when we get into a specific project, we have to get into details anyway. So,
well, that would be
I'll reach out to DCP and see.
Yeah.
But that would be part, excuse me, people, that would be part of Community Board 7's budget. It's
Right.
not
okay,
the expense. It would not be part of our district needs
Gotcha.
budget.
All right.
okay, and I just want to say that I fought for it, but they do not give them to community boards. I do not know why. It's a money thing. So it would have to be in the budget someplace to buy 5 copies. Yes, the last one that was done was approximately 5 years old, but the basic planning information in it is valid. And it actually doesn't have that many specific projects, but the recent specific projects can be found online.
Anyhow, Max, I'll follow up with you on that. We'll try to. Now, before we start the meeting, or maybe as a start to the meeting, I want to introduce Ben and I guess also Miranda. And I thought it would be useful for the new members if we went around and introduced ourselves and said, a few words about ourselves, what we do, etc. Louisa, you want to start?
Oh, okay. My name is Louisa Craddock. I've been on the board since 2016, I believe. And in my past life, I was the editor of the zoning resolution and I wrote the zoning handbook. So, Klari?
Got a lot of background, much more than Miranda and myself. So we look forward to learning a lot.
Call me whenever you want.
All right.
Next?
Yeah.
Okay, so welcome. You call yourself Ben, not Benjamin normally,
Ben's
or we
great.
call you Ben?
Yeah,
We'll
Ben's
call you
great.
Ben. Okay, whatever you prefer, if that's what it is, that's what it is for us. So let's see, I've been on the board less long than Richard Asche, I can say that. But a long time. And primarily what I've done in my years on the board is focus on parks, but I've also been involved in, transportation, land use, and other issues. So I'm not as new a member to this committee as you are. Actually, I might be. I've just been on this committee for a few months. Not sure when you joined it. That's the story.
Roberta.
Okay, I'm Roberta Seema. I'm not officially a member anymore because I'm chair of the Budget and Strategy Committee, but I come to every meeting. And my background with the board, I was on the board in the 90s, right after Riverside South went through ULURP. And I got off the board, and then I came back on when Riverside Center was about to go through ULURP. And I've been a community activist all my life.
Ben?
Yeah, so excited to be a part of this committee. I joined CB7 last summer. My background is a combination of, I did go to law school, I never practiced, have spent my life in the private sector, both in technology, kind of building companies and investing in companies, as well as I have done some real estate investing in the past as well, but basically spent my career investing in both private equity and credit in companies. I have also spent a fair bit of time on boards at hospitals, as well as on my co-op board as well. So I have some experience with real estate. I'm excited to get up to speed here.
Thank you. Miranda.
Hi, everyone. My name is Miranda Goodwin-Raab. I joined the community board last summer with Benjamin, or Ben. I'm excited to be on the land use committee because I wanted to be on it when I joined, and I got a no, and now I'm here. So this is very exciting. I started my career at Lincoln Center doing community outreach there. So this is all kind of full circle. So I used to have to go to community board meetings as part of my job. And I just recently finished working with the State Redistricting Commission, and now I'm working with the City Redistricting Commission in my professional capacity. So exciting. If you ever have questions about redistricting offline, feel free to reach out and I can help.
Ethel? Ethel, I think, has been on the board longer than I have.
Not much, but a long time. I'm an urban planner. I became one a number of years ago after teaching political science for a number of years. After a while, became the president of the New York Metro chapter of the American Planning Association at the time of 9/11, and was the president for a number of years. On Community Board 7, I was also, along with others, something of a coordinator and leader in the entire Riverside South great development with the with the Argentinians, and much later when Shelley Fine was chair, he asked me to become the head of a very important and difficult task force that was really initiated by Board 7, which was in the 2000s, to do a rezoning, to push for a rezoning of the area from 96th to 110th Street. It was one of the most important community-sponsored rezonings that took more than 2 years, and in which finally, through a lot of work of everyone, and I was tasked by Shelley to head that up, it became city planning remarkably sponsored the very application that Board 7 and hundreds of community people had worked on, and it was very important. And it's worth, I would just love at some point for Benjamin, Miranda, anyone, to kind of like just have a time to talk about what that process was, because the community was in an outrage because of two big buildings, everybody knows, at 100th Street, which were as of right. And the quick thing to say and you see how tall they were, and the zoning there was 8. We had just worked for years on the 10A, and everybody said, oh, we don't have to do anything because 8 is less than 10A. That was the biggest mistake around, because in the zoning resolution, 8 has no height limit. And much was learned, and that's one of the things that we can all be involved with. And I've been involved in most of the very big projects. Another important one was Columbus Circle, in which there was a tri-board task force of 4, 5, and 7, which I headed, and it was wonderful and very hard and difficult. Lastly, I'm just very interested in what Louisa said and others, because I've taught at Columbia in the graduate planning division, and so have done headed up many different studios and requests from all sorts of clients, and have done that and learned a lot. And the very last thing, thanks to Richard, which I remember in his joke, is that a couple of years ago, I think during the pandemic, a couple of us decided to review for the board and anybody who wanted to be there, a whole kind of analysis of what in the world happened with Riverside South and what happened with Donald Trump and what's the history. So we did a presentation, and really it was terrific, because I think just invitations sponsored by Gail and the board and others, I think there were like 140, 150 people on the Zoom. So it was a great thing that is on the YouTube of Board 7. And it's just very educational and good to do for, I think for all of us.
I know everybody knows.
Your joke with Richard, how he introduced me, he said something sort of like funny, nasty about that Ethel was negotiating with Trump, as if that was, something that anybody wanted to do. But okay.
Well, actually, Ethel, if you don't mind, can I tell the story?
Of course, I probably have forgotten, but I forget what you said. It was funny.
Many decades ago, when Trump was building the Riverside South, which he no longer owned, but he was in charge of building it. The community board, Ethel led a charrette.
A charrette. Well, we got
and we tried to get as much technical information as possible, and we realized we needed money, so we went to Trump. Not Ethel, but I think the then chair and I went to Trump Tower and met with Trump, and asked him for money, $50,000. He said, "You've got it, no problem." He said, "But I don't want that woman, Ethel Sheffer, to be involved in this at all." Which Ethel has worn as a badge of honor.
Yeah.
And by the way, we never got the money.
No, well, but one thing for the future, and this was also Board 7 was something of a pioneer. When we began to do the first Riverside South and West Side Futures, it was so hard and so crazy and difficult with a huge, so much to do. And I, and along with others, realized the board, and this is something for us to think about for the future, the board were filled with people of dedication and interest and talent, but who can do this? Who has the expertise? And the one thing I remembered, which was a precedent, walking into the deputy mayors and others in City Hall and saying, Community Board 7 needs money. It needs experts, and you have to do it because we are handling this whole Riverside South. And what happened was that some money did come through from the deputy mayor. I think Bobby Wagner then, and it was a precedent because it went through, a not-for-profit, and we hired Michael Quartla, a great planner who's still around, who did fantastic work, and a lawyer who was wonderful too. And it was all about helping the community board. And we didn't have the money, but they appropriated, but for the community board to help analyze it. It was very important. And then other boards proceeded to try to do that.
Max, everybody knows Max, but I'm not sure that everybody knows Max's background in land use. So.
That's true. Thank you. I'm Max. Prior to working in community boards and city government, I worked at the private planning firm, Nelson Pope and Voorhees, where I was a planner there. Immediately before that, I was in graduate school where I obtained a master's degree in city planning, where I focused in real estate, local economic development, and land use. And that's my background.
Okay. Shelley.
So my first exposure to land use was in the late 70s. We formed a group called the West Side Federation for Senior Housing at that time, eventually Senior and Supportive Housing. Now have 31 buildings, about a third, a little more than a third on the West Side, in Harlem, downtown, the Bronx, all over the place. So for some of those land use issues were very profound and were community fights. Some were less complicated, but I had a good grounding in that. In 1986, I got a call from then Borough President David Dinkins, may he rest in peace, to come to his office. And I was chair of the school board at that time, District 3, when we had school boards. And he said, I need you to serve on Community Board 7. I said, well, I didn't apply. He said, I know. Here's an application. I said, but I don't have time. He said, 1 year. I just need you there for 1 year. And that was 1986. Okay. So except for a little hiatus in there, been around all that time. When I became chair of the board, I had 3 goals, and one of them was the rezoning of 97 to 110th Central Park to the Riverside, and immediately called on Ethel, the most qualified person, most successful person that I knew and highly respected by city planning and by everyone, to chair that task force. And of course, we had wonderful people, Richard, who was here, but others also as a part of the task force. And we did something unique. We invited non-board members who were active in the community. As a result, we had 800 people at one meeting, with all but one supporting it and impressing city planning that this wasn't just a makeshift community board initiative, but was strongly supported by the community. And it was a long process, walking block by block, lot by lot with community, with the city planning people, and giving up our right to say it was ours, letting them sponsor it, which we felt was smart because eventually they have to vote for it. If it's theirs, we'll have their support. And Ethel helped out when things got a little weak at one point and we thought we were going to lose them. Ethel did her magic, okay, and got back on board. Over time, with a united community and a strong community board effort, we accomplished at that time the largest rezoning in the history of New York City, okay? And got virtually everything that we asked for. And we learned things. The one thing I'll share is that if you alternate zoning with a letter like 8A instead of 8, R8, 8A and 8B, you can prevent, say, mid-block 8B on the street, on the main streets, 8A, there cannot be transfer of air rights, as had happened in certain cases, particularly in the Excel buildings. And so we chopped it all up to guarantee that that couldn't be done, and that if there was a desire to have lots combined and higher and more massive buildings, that they would have to come to the community board, have a ULURP, and fight for what they want. We could get community concessions and make the have a large part in the decision making. So a lot was learned there, and it was a total community effort. And I think that that was the most profound. We've had others, been involved with others, but most of my experience has been through the West Side Federation for Senior and Supportive Housing, and those battles, which we have happy to say we won them all, and when involved this community with the help of the community board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and welcome, Benjamin and Miranda. This is a
Thank
great
you.
place to be.
Melissa?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, Melissa Rosenberg. I've been on the board for about since I think 2016 or 17. Professionally, I work in land use and real estate and shepherd large real estate projects through public processes. So spend my days doing this as well, and going to other community board meetings in addition to ours at nights, which is definitely a choice. Yeah, probably one of the few lovers of tall buildings on the committee, and yeah, looking forward to working with you both.
Seema? Unmute.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Seema. I think I've been on the board for 7 years, maybe 6 or 7, something like that. I am on land use and YEL. Miranda, I'm looking forward to catching up with you about Lincoln Center, because I worked there also for quite a few years. Yeah, I think that's it.
And just for historical purposes, Seema is a former chair of this committee. Daniela?
Hello. Just turned my camera on. I had it off because I'm connected from my phone, but I'm Daniela. I've joined the committee last year when I joined the community board. I'm a member also of the land use committee, and professionally I'm a real estate attorney. So also a lover of tall buildings when they're in the right place and context. I also had a very short background in architecture, so and urban planning. So it's all very like dear and close to my heart, and kind of what I like to nerd out about. So it's nice to be on the committee with you guys.
Thank you. And Barbara?
Hi, everybody. I also have been on the board for a really long time, with a big hiatus in between. I got on in the 90s, stayed on the board for 22 years. At some point, ran the Columbus Avenue bid for 20 years, and I retired from the bid about 2 years ago, and rejoined Community Board 7. During the time I was on the board, I was on many different committees, chaired several of the committees. Land use is the only one, or one of the very few, that I've never been on. Now I'm co-chair of Parks and Environment.
I was appointed to community board by Andrew Stein. I don't remember the year, but it was whenever he was the borough president. I worked on, I headed the board's effort on West Side Futures. I've worked on all of these task forces. I've been chair of this committee for a good long while, other than for a few years ago. And in my real life, I'm a litigating attorney, cutting back on my practice, but still active. So I think it was, I hope it was useful to you, Ben and Miranda, to get that background. My view is that the entire board should go through this process, not necessarily orally, but certainly we should have a paragraph about everybody on the board, because it's you put a background to a name and a face. So anyhow, welcome.
Thanks
to the committee. Roberta, yeah.
I did a little research. I went to the city planning website, and the last update of the handbook was 2018.
28. All right, but it's
4 years.
It doesn't. The details in it don't matter. It's just people need to get a sense of what is regulated and what the mechanism is for regulating bulk height, usage, and square footage, and the handbook. I'm sorry?
Define terms.
Yeah.
Very seriously, so that, people say what a lot is. But I mean, this actually spells out what legally in New York City a lot is. And there's a lot of stuff.
And it didn't prevent, Ben, as you know, it didn't prevent litigation on 200 Amsterdam Avenue as to what a lot is.
I for everyone's benefit, I face 200 Amsterdam right outside my home office right here. So I get the opportunity to look at it every day. I think my view of that building is nicer than their view of my building, but that's just to comfort myself. But overall, by the way, just listening to all the background, it's an impressive group with a lot of land use and real estate background. So I don't know how many can benefit from the handbook, but I certainly would. And it seems like a lot of folks here just have a lot of
one of the lessons you learn on this committee, and I guess on others, is that sometimes projects that you're against turn out to be just fine. I don't know whether 200 Amsterdam is one of them, but to me, it's not an atrocious building.
Richard, it's Klari, I have to go, but if I could just comment on that one, we had a lot of neighborhood opposition to the at the Museum of Natural History to the removal of the old planetarium and the construction of the new one, and I think that is a prime example of a building that some people, at least many people in the neighborhood, opposed, but is a fantastic. That they should have lived to regret it. Anyway, I got to go. So goodbye, guys.
I don't think the board didn't oppose it. They were just people.
No, I didn't mean that we did.
The people that opposed it now advertise it as being now that they're selling their apartments so many years later, advertise it as being across the street from this marvelous new
And it is gorgeous. Anyway, I got to leave, but welcome, Ben and Miranda, and see you next. Well, no, not see you next month. See you sometime soon. Bye.
Have a nice summer.
Thanks, Klari. Have a good summer.
Thanks, Claire.
We don't have much of a hard agenda. Ben and I spoke today to George James about the progress of our application to land use to rezone the ABC building. He's been getting a lot of flack from the staff. They want him to do an environmental review that is more extensive than he thinks is necessary, but he's got to do it. The main issue really is shadows, and he thinks there's an overall reduction in shadows, so he doesn't think that's going to be a problem. There may be some new shadows on the park, but he thinks overall it's going to be lessened. He hopes to have a draft to us next week, and when and if it comes, we'll circulate it.
Richard, did you show Benjamin the study that he did a few years ago on the ABC property?
I haven't shown Benjamin, yeah. Benjamin and I just hooked up less than a week ago, so I haven't had a chance to.
Why don't I send links to everybody on the committee and everyone?
Okay.
that's-
It's
That's
also important in this instance that the original application or request for zoning and rezoning of the particular site, I mean, there's a lot of ABC buildings, but the one under question came from Landmark West. And they were the advocates for it. And George, I think, was a consultant to them. However, as time went on, and that's something to be perhaps aware of, that when the community board recently, talking, of course, with Landmark West, said, we think we are approve of this potential zoning, and that we'd like to be the applicant as well, that, and which Landmark West agreed, but just to recognize that the standing of the community board coming in to be the applicant was and is a very good thing. I mean, Landmark West had done a good job, but with more standing even than Landmark West, which had been an individual applicant for quite a long time.
Thank you. Melissa?
Yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to flag something and put it out there for discussion, which is that, Silverstein sold the site to Extel because of this pending land use action. And, does that really put us in a better position as a community when we might have a developer who's like less responsible than the one who was going to develop it? I just, want us to be thoughtful about, our actions, but we'll see how this moves forward relative to how their development plans move forward. But I think the lesson here in my mind is that engagement with the owner of the site is really important and something that we should be thinking about, when pursuing land use actions like this, as opposed to sort of operating in kind of a more siloed fashion. That's just my take.
Actually, we, Ethel and I think Mark met with Silverstein a few years ago.
Yeah, it was a few years ago, and I think
and we told them at that time that
Richard, we had a big meeting. It was me. I was chair of the board at the time. You, Ethel, I think
I was there too at one.
And we had a very very productive meeting with him.
No, but there was another meeting with Mark. I think when Mark was there, it was probably later.
It was.
But they were very much aware of what our views were, and they played their hand pretty close to the vest. So in any event, they've sold it, or at least agreed to sell it. So we're dealing with Extel instead of Silverstein. Seema, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just had a question. Given our thinking about the DNS, I was just wondering if there's any funding needed associated with our application. Is there something we should be thinking about
That's
there?
an interesting question. When we agreed to be the applicant, we were promised that.
Richard, if I could just, the financial request is for the fiscal year 2024. So while we need money in 2022.
But wouldn't it start like
just
after
an
July?
answer to Seema, we were told when we agreed to be the applicant that we would not be required to contribute any funds. As a side note, at the last meeting that we had with George, I think it was a Zoom meeting, either he or he raised the fact that we have paid him $9,000 for another project that he hasn't used up yet. So he owes us $9,000 worth of work. And he asked whether any portion of that could be used to contribute to his compensation on this project. We said we would discuss it, but the sense I had is that Steve is not ready to do that. It's really not necessary that we do that. We still are owed $9,000 worth of work by George.
Got it. Thanks.
All right, so the only other project that I have to report on, the Fetner Project between, on 96 between Broadway and West End. As anyone knows who's driven past it, construction is proceeding. They've basically finished digging the dirt out. They have begun the foundation. The only dirt removal that needs to be done before they pour the slab is the dirt that's under the current ramp. And they're going to move the ramp further west in order to do that. I asked him about the dirt field, the brownfield aspect of the project. He said they've been inspected numerous times by DEC, and that the slab, the grade level slab can't be poured until they get final approval. He said that the last tests they've done of the soil indicates that it's free of any contaminant. So he seems to have gotten that under control. And in any event, it's up to DEC to pass on it. I asked him when he thought the project would be ready to occupy, and his guess was January 2024, although he hoped that it might be earlier. He said he's gotten complaints about two things: noise and dust. As to the dust complaint, he has increased the use of water on the site. And of course, there won't be as much dust now that the site is fully excavated. And the same thing with noise, the jackhammers and those things. He acknowledged they're very noisy, and that won't be a problem any longer. So that's the status. He's happy to come meet with us anytime we want, and he's happy to work with the neighbors. Some of the neighbors apparently have told him that they're very happy he's building this building because it's an improvement over what was there. So those are the projects that we have, and I wanted to throw the floor open now to a discussion about where we're going as a committee, where we have the luxury of not having deadlines, and whether there are things that we can explore that involve land use that are not currently part of the ULERP process, and not part of any process that requires a community board vote. So anybody.
Are you talking about just a generalized project? Because I have one of, which is that we have a lot of tall buildings. Everyone may have noticed this, they're as of right. That we would institute some kind of push with city planning for a text change that over X amount of stories, it would have to be a special permit. Ethel is shaking her head no, but there is no control.
I know, to your point, it's just going to be, I think it's something for us to talk about.
We could talk about it. I mean, the point is that right now, the community board, the community itself has no control over the heights of certain buildings that are coming in that are dominating the landscape. Broadway in the 90s now is changing radically.
There are the zoning that we did pass, that whole effort, of which there's only been a new building, only beginning now, has very specific zoning requirements. It's along Broadway, it's 9A. which was a huge fight because city planning wanted it more 10A, but finally agreed. And so that has very specific regulations about bulk and height. And then it does permit, and that's something we should learn about, that wasn't what the community wanted, but finally that was the difficult bargain to get city planning to really make it happen. And that is that there is between 97th and 110th, the potential for voluntary inclusionary zoning, that is to provide affordable housing in any new buildings, and in return that there is a somewhat higher FAR, but it's very much in the whole text and all in regulation. I believe, and Shelley may know more, the one building that's going up now, I believe you see it living in the neighborhood. I think it's 103
on the
103rd on Broadway.
Southeast corner of Broadway.
Right, and that
these are all over 97th Street. These are all subject to the new zoning. What is going in now, I think there are 3 new buildings, maybe 4, from 91st to 96th.
Correct.
There are 4.
And they're huge and it's frankly ugly. The thing is that all of that work that did put in a zoning change, a major zoning change from 97th up, that maybe we should, hopefully not after the horses have been stolen, to try and do that again, because all of a sudden we are getting a lot of very tall, expensive residential buildings along Broadway with a lot of commercial space that is empty. They're not benefiting the community.
Yeah, I don't know. With all due, I don't know. I don't see there being a lot of political appetite for something like that in
Neither do I.
this part of Manhattan.
Also,
Do I. And if we were going to push for a text change of any kind, I think I would much prefer to focus on affordable housing.
Right. The buildings that are there up to 96th Street are governed by the R10A, and that's why. And so they are that with an important exception also, because R10A permits voluntary inclusionary housing for developers to provide that. And the bad thing, which I would say is necessary to look at, is the one building that's been going up on Broadway, very conspicuous between 96th and 95th. I won't go into it now, but that is a building that somehow that it came in under the technicality that when we looked at it, we were all recently in a state about it, that because of some relationship, which I can't explain and you don't want to hear it, I don't even think I'm able to, somehow they were able to use some floor area or some financing from one of the buildings that was in Riverside South. And so when they came to the board, we thought, okay, this is polite, it's an R10A, but then we were told they could, involuntary inclusionary, they could get a bonus, and all they are providing is one affordable unit. I mean, it was the worst thing. This is only a year in a state of misery and shock and the only thing, which is something we could look at, I don't know if it's going to happen again, we realized that there had been a technicality in the zoning resolution about on voluntary, and somehow they could do that. It's unique, it's wrong, It's not good, but that's it. Otherwise, those buildings are R10A according to the zoning.
Right, Ethel, those are contextual buildings. The building on 96th Street was, as you said, a technical, a lawyer's dream that they were able to do it. But that is not contextual zoning. And everybody, any number with it over 5, from 6 to 10 with an A, B, with a letter after it, is contextual zoning, which means that they should fit in some way in terms of height and density, setbacks. Setbacks are very important to the streetscape and not tower over everybody like 200 Amsterdam does. But the thing is that, you know, everything that was written at city planning, I mean, there were just all these smart lawyers who followed afterwards and found loopholes in it constantly. I mean, you just were always plugging up the loopholes. But the thing is that we should maybe look at the new buildings that are being built, find the loopholes ourselves, and come back to city planning, which is probably already looking at them and saying, why is this happening?
Shelley?
Yeah, I have a suggested project, okay, and something we don't often do. We had a large ULURP on Riverside Center. Why don't we take a look at what really happened, okay? Was it what we had recommended in our resolutions? How did it all play out? Did we get the right percentage of apartments, not square footage? And were the apartments, we got square footage, not just apartments, because apartments could be small. And what of the amenities that we felt should go to everybody, went to everybody, including the affordable apartments, to review those things. I think it's a good exercise, and we can learn about it to see, one, for suggestions, as Louisa suggested, for city planning, and to inform us as we move forward when projects come, what to look for and what the loopholes and issues might be.
2 problems, Shelley. One is we've got pretty much everything on. I think looking at Riverside Center will be a good idea. I think we've pretty much got everything there. The problem was Riverside South. The last 3 or 4 buildings were the ones with the loopholes, and you know, there was a lot of horse trading that, you know, somehow different animals got substituted for the horses.
See, I actually was involved with one seriously disabled person who somehow was left out of the right count and pursued it, and the person is living there now. But it was that the application did not include her disability. Things like that came up along the way. I was involved directly with one, but what actually happened? Did it work out the way we hoped it would? I think a little review of that would be worthwhile. Or do we just do things, we put our best effort, and then whatever happens, happens, and we don't learn or review it? I think we should review all our projects and see.
How would, Shelley, how would you go about doing that? I guess we could get whatever we can get FOI from HPD. Beyond that. And then maybe we should start with a FOI request from HPD. They're the most secretive. They are far more secretive than the CIA.
Absolutely.
Right. Yes. May I just suggest that a big change when Riverside South originally came forward and all those negotiations that everybody was learning, the board and others in the city said there has to be a certain percentage of affordable housing. I don't remember, but I know this. What was written was the amount of affordable housing in terms of number of units.
Right.
not floor area. And that permitted a certain number, but what we all learned after that was that, wait a minute, the community, everybody, that's permitting fewer affordable. So when Riverside Center, many years later, went through ULURP, I believe that was Extel, because they bought
Yes.
it all from Trump or whatever. Then what is written in, and everybody works at it, in the restrictive declaration, floor area percentage, which permitted, I forget, was it 20 or 25%, but not units, that permitted more affordability by using floor area. That was a very, very big lesson. And then that has been written in subsequently, and it's far from perfect, but that's a big improvement in terms of at least affordability. That's the case also, even not as good, the voluntary inclusionary that exists under the contextual north of 96th Street.
Yeah, it was 20% of the floor area.
Right, and
Square
that
footage.
gave you more. There's not enough, but it would more than using units, which really was just like a bargain, you know.
And it therefore provided more units and some larger units too.
Yes, and
My
better.
guess is that a large percentage of that obligation was met off-site.
Well, with the voluntary, that's written in.
Yeah, and my view on that is that the trade-off for doing it off-site is way too generous to the developer.
Right, yeah.
If you're building something at 59th and West End, and you get credit for something at 110th Street, you know, it should double your obligation.
Aren't there tax benefits as well? I mean, don't after building these buildings have to actually be compliant in order to kind of receive a variety of tax benefits?
Yes.
Some do, yeah.
Yeah, but that's if I may say, a critical part of how this all works, but it's not the same. I mean, this is something for us to go over.
Most of the units that were off-site were from Riverside South, not Riverside Center. Riverside Center had to put, I think it was 255 units that they were going to build. And within 3 buildings. And I believe that they meant that, but I think we should verify that with HPD.
Yeah, I think so. And, you know, the other pet peeve that I have, and this came up with Fetner, is that the definition of affordable is bizarre. It allows somebody who has 2 kids and a spouse to earn 140,000 or maybe more now, and still qualify for affordable housing. And the bulk of the housing at the Fetner site was in that category, so that people who really did need affordable housing weren't getting it. And that's, I mean, I'm pretty sure that's because HPD is trying to maximize the income from the, you know, from the deals that it makes. But it's something I think we need to look at.
Richard, if you read the district needs statement for 2023 fiscal year, you'll see when we're talking about affordable housing, we say affordable for whom, and we explain how the AMI and how. So what happens with the AMI? It includes Westchester, parts of Long Island, and so the basic level is much higher than it would be, and right. So it's what percentage? So we did put that into the district needs statement for 2023, and we will put it again for 2024.
Well, I'll read it avidly. I have to admit I haven't read it yet, but I will.
It's a fun read. What can I tell you?
Oh well.
You might
I have to
leave
leave,
doing-
so I'm sorry that I have to leave too. And very welcome, Benjamin, and to be continued, and Miranda, very much so. And to be continued. I think we should, we have some thoughts about what to do at an opportunity in the future. Because the paradox, if I may lastly say, is that unlike lots of places all over New York, Board 7 does not necessarily have a whole bunch of new ULURPs in the offering. That unlike and we had so many all the time, but it's not the same because of the nature of the development and what's happened here. So maybe some planning and working on some of these issues and learning from what happened before would be very helpful indeed. Thanks.
All right, well, look,
Can I jump in?
yeah, sure.
I've been trying to wait. Okay, so two things. One, I do think it's an interesting idea, the study of like what we plan for versus what happened. And I think, MAS did something similar for like Long Island City, that rezoning. So I like that idea too. I think we should start looking at where we can proactively try to change the zoning to encourage more affordable housing development, and in general, target areas where we'd be comfortable seeing more height and more density, because those are necessary to deliver that affordable housing in MIH. So I think if we're kind of dismayed with the lack of ULURPs, the lack of housing and affordable housing, let's look at where we'd be okay with density and where we would want more affordable housing. And let's proactively put forward a proposal that creates housing rather than restricts development.
How would it be if Ben and I and Melissa and Louisa kind of put our heads together and see what an action plan might look like? So, Ethel, you're welcome to join it if you.
Yeah.
I think we should at least pay attention, difficult as it is, to what Melissa just said. Because if we want more, then the trade-off now is more density. And we have fought hard not to do that. If I may suggest, I was just at a CHPC Citizens Housing Planning Council meeting the other day, and they have put out a book available for new zoning, or how to weigh these, that you need more affordability. And their claim is no matter what, you're going to have more density. But I don't know, I'm not to be agree with, but Melissa said it well, that it's a major dilemma now, and one that it's worthwhile for us to look at and work together on. Thanks a lot.
Look, I think that, we could make suggestions for strengthening the voluntary inclusionary housing, for mandatory inclusionary housing, which exists in other places, but not in our district. And also look at what has happened in past projects, and sort of, do an autopsy there.
Richard,
And also,
Richard, I'd be glad to join you.
All right.
and also just sort of the goal. I mean, I would be curious as to how much, in our district, what's the current base of affordable housing units? What are we defining as affordable housing units? And what our goal would be. Obviously, it's always good to have more, but what's realistic, and kind of setting a goal that we can achieve. Because it's always good to have more, but impossible to reach what we always ideally want.
But go online and look at our district needs statement. You'll learn a lot from it. And I'll also send you some other stuff from Furman Center.
It may surprise you to learn that Roberta is the author of that.
We have a lot of authors on this committee. It's an impressive committee.
Beverly and I worked. Beverly did harder work on it than I did, but the two of us did it.
It's thankless work.
Yeah, it was.
Thanks.
But satisfying.
All right. So anything else? Any new business, old business? Anybody know any good jokes?
Richard, I thought you were going to mention something around whether there's also compliance on the scaffolding.
Yeah, we
That's an
did. We did talk about that, and we talked about it at an earlier meeting.
Okay.
I think, let's see what happens with this project. I don't want to be
Have too many different goals.
and I'm not sure if there's a practical solution to the scaffold issue, but
Yeah.
it's certainly something for the future.
I know that Andrew Rigie had been working on it with Ben Kalos when he was in the city council, and I think we should ask Andrew if he's working on it with a different city council person now, because they did have a group on it.
All right. Where do you want to call Andrew and get? caught
Sure,
up?
I'll shoot him an email and ask him.
Okay. All right. Anything else?
Happy summer, everybody.
You all too.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Take care.
Thanks.
Stay healthy.
And safe.